October 3rd, 1993. In the Battle of Mogadishu, two United States Delta Force members, Gary Gordon and Randall Shugart, requested to be inserted at the site of a Black Hawk helicopter that had gone down in the city of Mogadishu and was under attack. They requested to be inserted there to protect the lives of the survivors of that crash. Their initial request was denied twice, but eventually approved, and they were inserted into that scene. And they did, in fact, protect the sole survivor at that point, Chief Warrant Officer Michael Durant, who had been the pilot. And they did protect him, although both of them were eventually killed. Michael Durant was taken prisoner, but very much alive, and was later released, and he went on to write several books. He's still very much alive today. For their heroism and sacrifice, Gordon and Shugart were presented posthumously with the Congressional Medal of Honor. About that time, actually not long after that, I think it was 1996, while I was in seminary, I was working in a group home for emotionally disturbed children. This was a small complex of houses on a large property owned by Catholic Charities outside of San Francisco. And there were about 12 boys to each house, roughly grouped by age. There were usually 2 or 3 staff members in each home at all times. I was one of those staff members, and we would try to manage and feed and police and generally try and keep some kind of productive order in a household with 12 very troubled and often very violent young men. Wonderful training for the ministry, by the way. One of the kids I remember was, I'll call him Jamal, though that's not his real name. And he was the kind of kid who got picked on a lot. He was a ward of the state because his mother was in prison and his grandmother had kicked him out of her house after he had set fire to a garbage can, and there wasn't anyone else to take care of him. You are probably aware that it's really hard to find foster homes for 12-year-old black kids, especially young men with a history of substance abuse and living on the street. But Jamal, this particular kid, was also, I thought, extremely wise for a child of his age and background, and one who was so emotionally damaged. And his wisdom, I think, was probably one of the reasons he got picked on so much. One time, this is the story I'm telling, after he had been bullied and hurt by some of the bigger kids, and after the staff had gotten things under control and we had everyone in a circle to sort of process and identify better ways to handle their differences, this young man, Jamal, through tears and sobbing with the whole house present, said to the boys who had roughed him up, he said, "You're not strong enough to not be mean. You're not strong enough to not be mean." Both of these stories I just told, I have a hard time even imagining the kind of courage that it would require to do those things. And courage is our subject this morning. I had an enlightening conversation with Maria Tolero, a member of our congregation and a professor of philosophy who specializes in courage. Had a lovely conversation with her a couple of weeks ago. She gave me a primer on how philosophers think of courage, and I'm going to try and do justice to that right here. And if I get something wrong, the error is absolutely mine and not Maria's. The whole framework and understanding for courage in Western civilization, turns out, comes from the ancient Greeks, especially Aristotle and Nicomachean ethics. The pressing question for Aristotle was moral excellence. What is moral excellence, and how does one achieve it? And Aristotle's answer to that was pragmatic and empirical. You move towards moral excellence by doing morally excellent things. It's not just some static state of being or something you can claim if it only exists in your head or in your intentions. You have to do, you have to act, you have to create, you have to work, you have to engage, you have to be the actual cause of some actual effect in the world. Note that the word actual begins with the word act, as in action, activity, and activate, and that prefix, a whole slew of related words are there too, like accomplish and achieve. I used to tell my children, it's not rocket science. Self-esteem arises from the self doing things worthy of esteem. To Aristotle, the virtuous person is someone who does not succumb to either the temptation to imperviousness on one hand or being scared witless on the other. The first leads to recklessness and stupidity, the second to cowardice or being frozen into inaction. To Aristotle, either of those extremes were the vices, not the virtues. So becoming a virtuous person, becoming a courageous person, was about practice, getting into situations that might tempt you to either extreme, but you don't give in to them. And you learn this by doing it over and over again as you develop and demonstrate your character. But according to Maria, that's only the first part. And Aristotle leaves the motivation question unanswered. Maria, as a philosopher, wants to know, well, how is it one would want to be courageous? Why on earth would we willingly choose such difficult lessons? How do we stay the course when the temptation for an easier option will always be present? And the answer, Maria says, which Aristotle didn't answer, the answer is relationship. The answer is community. The answer is connection, our sense of belonging to others. The answer is love. We learn by imitating the behavior we admire. We are literally encouraged by the love that we long for, the love that we give, the love we allow ourselves to receive. I think about all the stories I've heard of people who have run into burning buildings or put themselves at great risk to save someone. And many of them, when asked, why did you do that? They answer, because they would have done it for me. Or something very like that. I think about young Jamal, who so desperately, instinctively, bravely wanted and needed a more authentic relationship with his community and was willing to take a great social, physical risk to try and achieve it. I think about all the people marching in the streets these days, standing up against police brutality, putting themselves at risk of judgment, of exposure to COVID-19 and personal injury because there appears to be a growing recognition that until black and brown lives matter as much as white ones, systemically, culturally, materially, until that time comes, none of us are truly free. Not us, not the people who love us, not the people we love. In the words of Martin Luther King, no one is free until all of us are free. Take courage, friends. Your community is here for you. Amen.